Good morning and welcome to today's Eurostat webinar. We're going to be looking at a new publication, Key Figures on the European Food Chain. First of all, let me just introduce myself. I'm Tim Allen. I'm the Deputy Head of Unit for Dissemination and User Relations. I'll be moderating today's webinar. We have a number of Eurostat colleagues attending. I'll introduce them one by one as we go through the webinar. A couple of points of housekeeping. I'd like to just remind you that we are recording today's webinar and we will be making the recording available afterwards for those who can't follow us live. We're also, we have some interactive elements during the presentations and a Q&A session, which we will be running via Slido. Now, depending on where you're joining us from, you may be seeing a QR code for accessing the Slido area where we can collect your questions and where you can interact with certain elements of the presentation. Please feel free to send us questions via Slido and we'll get to them at towards the end of the seminar. So that's all I want to say. I'd like to introduce the first speaker this morning. It's Viveka Palm. She is our Director of Sectoral and Regional Statistics, which covers the agricultural statistics area. And she'll make a brief introduction. Viveka, over to you.
So thank you very much, Tim, and welcome to everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. As Tim was saying, my name is Viveka Palm. I'm the Director of the Sectoral and Regional Statistics Directorate at Eurostat. I'm very happy to present this first edition of Key Figures on the European Food Chain at the webinar. And this publication responds to the interest of the European Commission's Farm to Fork strategy, which is an integral part of the new Green Deal that sets up to make Europe the first climate neutral continent by 2050. So as we will see in this seminar, and as you will note when you read the publication, the strategy aims to establish a sustainable food system and also to focus on issues like if it's a fair system, if it's healthy food, if it's environmentally friendly, but also if the food is affordable. We will also delve deeper into the chain, all the processes that are there, all the people that are working to make sure that the food goes from being produced at the farm, maybe sold at the farm, but then also processed and further distributed until you will all find it somewhere in your home or in your retail or eating it. So we are trying to cast a broad net where you can see several societal aspects of agriculture and of the food chain itself. So this publication draws on a rich collection of official data and statistics published by Eurostat. And as all our statistics, they are free and accessible online, and you can find them in our publicly available database, Eurobase, where you can both see it for the EU as a whole, but also for the countries and for regions. So I hope you will like the new publication and that you will feel inspired to use it and after the webinar has finished. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Viveka. So now I'm going to introduce Edward Cook, who's a statistician within the Agriculture and Fisheries Statistics Unit and the man who coordinated this publication. I just remind you that this Key Figures on the European Food Chain is the third in a new series of publications from Eurostat. So we started with Key Figures on Europe. Last year we published Key Figures on European Business. This is the third, which shows, the importance of this area, as Viveka outlined. It's the publication came out in mid-December, and Edward will give you an overview of its contents. I believe there's also some interactive elements in his presentation, and I remind you again that we'll be running these via Slido if you can find the link. So over to you, Edward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim and Viveka, and thank you all for joining us live today. You're most welcome to this webinar on our new publication, Key Figures on the European Food Chain. As Tim said, I'm Edward Cook, and I'm the editor of this publication. And I start with a confession. That confession is food and drink is something that's close to my heart, but also my stomach. But I have a huge respect for and interest in farming and agriculture. So over the next few minutes, I want to convince you that this is not some old, boring topic, but the complete opposite. It's absolutely fascinating and it is totally relevant. It is, in fact, a hot topic. Importantly, food is much more than just the energy that we need to survive. So I'd like to start by asking you just to spend the next 15 seconds or so thinking about what food and drink means to you. And I'll carry on talking and set up my slideshow. Not that. Let me just set it up, please. Bear with me. It gives you more time to think, because in fact, I've absolutely no doubt that your ideas are going to be very close to mine and will underline why food and drink is such a central point in everybody's lives. And that means that, in fact, this publication and this topic is one of the few that anyone and everyone can relate to. Now, I seem to be having a little bit of a problem sharing my screen, so please bear with me. Hopefully you still see at least me on screen, but not the slide version I wanted. So perhaps I could ask Philip if he would be very kind and see whether he can take control and post up my slides, please. Okay. You wouldn't believe that we went through this 20 times in rehearsals and we had no problems with it at all. Is that any good for you at all there? Well, let me carry on in any case, because I think you've had a bit of a time to think about what food and drink means to you. Of course, it is the necessary nutrition that we need for life. But at least for me, I also associate it with health. You are what you eat. We also can associate food and drink with cultural identity. Think about the number of times you go on holiday and you say, well, I'd love to try the food and the drink when we get there. And of course, there's a whole language about food as well. We also have associations with social activity. We come together in a communion. We share meals with our friends and family. Sometimes we even think about where the foods come from. We think about the land, we think about the sea, we think about the people who have either reared or harvested the food that we're eating on our plate. We have sensory connections through our sight, through smell and taste. And then, of course, there are also links to various traditions, and some of those are religious traditions as well. So, of course, it's not an exhaustive list, but I hope that some of those thoughts tally with your own. The important thing is that you can see that there are multiple associations with food and drink, so we should be interested where it comes from, and everyone can be interested in it. But there have always been challenges. You only have to go to, well, you can go back as far as, let's say, 1798 and the philosopher Thomas Malthus. And he wrote about growing populations finding it increasingly difficult to survive from existing resources. Now, that rather pessimistic outlook is, in fact, to some degree, still relevant today. Because we live in an increasingly populated and polluted world living with climate change. So there's huge pressure on the food and drink systems. And that puts them at the heart of global challenges and opportunities. Okay, I'm not quite sure what you can see. So Philip, perhaps you go to number 3, please, on the PowerPoint. Okay. Do you see that? So when we think about the food chain, what do we think about? What are some of the issues that we're thinking about? Well, perhaps you're thinking of organic farming. You think about less dependency on pesticides and herbicides. Perhaps you're thinking about sustainable and nutritious food, or the health issues like obesity and various diets, or affordable food, food waste, food security. Well, all of these and many other issues are covered and addressed in the European Commission's Farm to Fork strategy. But strategies and the challenges that are faced throw up a multitude of questions. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Questions. There are always questions. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but let me just select 3 to whet your appetite. So, firstly, how many farmers are there in the EU? And who's going to produce agricultural products in the future? Now, this is interesting because we know we have a problem of aging farm populations in the EU. And we have issues of succession. Another question, how much is produced in the EU and how does this compare to the past? Well, this is interesting because we might see the direct impact of climate change on quantities being produced. If average summer temperatures continue to increase and dry spells get longer, how will this impact on agricultural production? And one last question, and there are thousands. Is there food poverty in the EU? And where is this most acute? And this is interesting because it tells us something about the availability of affordable and nutritious food. There are literally thousands of questions you might ask about the food chain. And our publication tries to answer some of these by shedding a light on the complexity of the chain with analysis of official figures gathered from member states. This is the front cover of our new publication. It's less than 1/2, in fact, the length of our predecessor, the previous publication, which was a statistical book. So you might ask, why the change? Well, to be honest, we needed something snappier. We needed to focus on key messages. So we came up with the idea of a snapshot of the whole chain from primary agricultural and fisheries production through the processing stage, trade, distribution, the wholesale stage, to end consumption, waste, and environmental impact. We needed something that was visually improved, that we could use in social media. So we introduced a number of visual enhancements. But we also wanted to provide the same kind of level of detail that we had before. So we introduced QR codes that could be scanned to our Statistics Explained articles, where there are lots more details. And I will try and show you an example of that later. We also kept the dataset codes so that you can link directly to the free database from which we extracted the data. And we also needed to keep it as up-to-date as possible. So we updated the chapters right through until the end of November before we went to our publication release on the 15th of December. So let me try and show you the new product. Hopefully I'll have a little more success with this. And you can see now the table of contents of the new publication. And I thought to myself, well, how can I best show you around a publication? Well, breathe easy. It's not my plan to scroll through every single page. My idea was to give you a flavor of the publication through a quiz. There are 10 chapters of the publication, so I went for 10 questions in the quiz. So please go to Slido, where you will see the first 2 questions that are in a multiple choice format. And please have a go at answering them. The remaining 8 questions are not through Slido, but still play along if you will. So if you're ready, let's play. So the first question you should find on Slido regards chapter 1 on farms and the farm labour force. What proportion of the EU's 10.3 million farm managers were under 40 years old in 2016? Was it A, 31%, B, 21%, or C, 11%? And I'll ask also about question 2. If I can find question 2. I'll come back to question 2. Tim, do we have any answers on Slido for question 1, please?
I think Anna Maria's keeping track of Slido. Anna Maria, do we have? Oh.
So,
okay, so the answers, 60% are saying yes, so a vast majority are going for only 11% are under 40. Around 1/3 are opting for 21% under 40, and 10% of answers are 31% under 40.
okay, well, thank you, Tim. So I find that very interesting because, in fact, the answer is C. just 10.7% of farm managers in the EU were under 40 years old in 2016. So if you can see now from the illustration on the left-hand side, you can see the distribution of farm managers, and you can note the inverted age pyramid. Almost 1/3 of farm managers are over 65 years old, and only 10.7 are under 40 years old. So this highlights the growing issue of farm succession. Okay. Tim, could you read out, please, question 2 for me on Slido?
Sorry, I don't have Slido open. Anna Maria, do you have question 2?
Okay, I'll take it. Which countries in the EU produced the most cereals in 2020? You have 3 choices. A combination of countries. So Anna Maria, what are the answers coming through on Slido, please?
So we're getting the majority of people are picking France, Germany and Poland, and roughly equal numbers are picking France, Spain and Italy, or Spain, France and Romania. But roughly 2/3 of people are opting for France, Germany and Poland as the answer.
Thank you. Well, that's the right answer. You can see that about 47% of all the cereals grown in the EU were grown in those 3 countries. Now I'm going to take you through to the Statistics Explained article, which is on crop products. This gives a lot more detail about the 2020 crop harvests, and you can see that there is a large section on the agro-meteorological events that happened during the growing seasons. And this analysis also provides a map, a key weather impact map, that looks at the condition of summer crops in August 2020. And perhaps you can see from the map that the cereals belt through France, going into Germany and indeed parts of Western Poland, was in a very poor condition. And we noted that cereals production in 2020 was some 21 million tonnes less than the record of 2014. So the question is whether climate change is already having an impact. And to know that, we need to keep collecting data. Now, there's no Slido for the following questions, but I'll try and speed it up as I know that we've had some technical glitches. So on chapter 3, there was a question about agricultural output value. And that was, in which member state does agriculture contribute the highest share of GDP? The answer is Romania at 3.8%. Now you can see from here that the contribution at the level of the EU is 1.3%, and that has held steady since 2005. Now it may not sound a lot, 1.3%, but let me put that in context. It is slightly more than the GDP of Greece. So you can see in that context that agriculture is still big business. In chapter 4, we go to fishing and aquaculture. So question is, in which marine area does the EU fleet catch the most fish by weight? And you could see in this nice graphic representation here that slightly over 2/3 of the EU's catch comes from the Northeast Atlantic. So there are questions about what that means for protecting the marine environment and stocks in that region. We have a whole chapter regarding the processing of food and beverages in chapter 5. So one question there is, how many people are involved in food and beverages processing? We have a different style of representation here, and from the right-hand bubble, you can see that another 4.5 million persons were employed in food and beverages processing. That's on top of the 9 to 10 million people working in agriculture. In chapter 6, we move to trade. So one question there is, which country was the principal destination for the EU's exports of animals and animal products? Again, a different form of representation, and you can see here that China was the principal destination, that 22.8% of animals and animal products from the EU were transported to China. In the case of vegetables or animal oils and fats, the United States was the principal destination. And trade information is important not only from an economic viewpoint, but also understanding where our food comes from and where it goes to. In chapter 7, we started to look at transport. And my question there is, what share of agriculture, forestry and fisheries products were carried over distances of less than 50 kilometers by road? Again, you see our rather stylized presentation where we use stones at the bottom to indicate the scale. And you can see that 1/3 of agriculture, forestry and fishery products travelled by road on distances under 50 kilometres. But in fact, this was much less than nearly the half for all products. And it highlights the relative dependence on long-haul transportation by road for agriculture, forestry and fishery products, and why there is a move to create shorter supply chains. Right, we're into the home straight now. Chapter 8, we chose about the wholesale provision of food and beverages. And my question is, how many people were employed in the EU by enterprises in the wholesale, retail and serving of food and beverages? And again, if you look at the right-hand bubble, you'll see that another 16.4 million people were employed in these kinds of enterprises. So when you put together the people working in the wholesale, retail serving, with those in processing, with farmers, and then consider all the other people who are also working in ancillary services in the chain, you can see that a huge number of people are employed working in the food chain in the EU. In chapter 9, we went towards end consumption. And the question is, which member state has the highest food poverty rate? And the answer, as you can see from the ladder that is on the right-hand side of the page, that a little over 1/4 of people in Bulgaria experienced food poverty. as defined by an inability to afford a meal with meat, fish, or a vegetarian equivalent every second day. So again, this comes back to the issue of the availability and affordability of nutritious food. And lastly, the last chapter was to look at the environmental impact of agriculture and the food chain. So the question is, agricultural processes account for what kind of proportion of all EU greenhouse gas emissions? The answer is that in 2019, they accounted for 10.3% of all greenhouse gases. That is despite, in fact, the overall amount of emissions from agriculture falling by 1/5 between 1990 and 2019. And that is because it fell faster in other sectors of the economy. So I hope that gives you a flavour of the insight this publication can give into the food chain and how official data can inform policy on the farm to fork strategy. Now, very quickly, I'd like to show you a couple of other products that we have. So I'm going to do what everybody does, a Google search for Eurostat. There we are. I mentioned that in the publication, we provide dataset links, and it comes through all the way to our free public database, Eurobase. In addition, you will find the entry point for all our Statistics Explained articles, which are divided into the various themes of statistics that we collect. And we also have our dedicated website for agriculture and one for fisheries, as well as forestry. And here you can find a lot more information about what we collect, how we collect it, and the methodologies that are in place. So at that stage, I'd like to thank you very much for listening. And I wonder whether next time you eat a meal, you'll think about where your food has come from and who has helped to get it to your plate. And perhaps you might even think of our publication and find yourself saying, well, I never knew that. Thank you, and we're happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Edward. We're now going to set up the Q&A session with a number of other colleagues. I've introduced Viveka and Edward obviously already, but I'd just like to mention some of the other colleagues we have with us today. And I'm just checking my my crib sheet to make sure I get everybody's job title correct. We have Ruxandra, who is the head of unit for agriculture and fisheries. We have Mario, who is the deputy head of unit in that unit. We have Helena, who is the team leader for farm statistics. And I can see Monica, who is the team leader for agri-environmental statistics. Eduardo and Viveka, of course, are still with us. I'm here, so I might handle one or two questions that go outside the area, and otherwise we'll distribute the questions. We have some in already, but I would remind you we're collecting them via Slido. I will just make a general point that the team we have here is largely our agriculture statistics unit and the agriculture statistics team. So I know that the book goes more widely, and some of the questions that go into some of the areas that would be covered by business statistics, we may have to defer and get back to you with an answer. But otherwise, I'll start. The first question we had was, what is the share of holdings with other gainful activities compared to the total number of holdings? And I believe there that Helena had an answer for that.
Thank you very much, Tim. Yes, this question can be answered now because it was requested in advance. Normally, we call this an ad hoc request that people can submit to our user support. So 77% of the farms which are sole holder holdings in Europe do have reported in 2016 that they have one or more other gainful activities related to the holding. Sole holder holdings are 95% of the farms in Europe. So I hope this answers Matteo's question. Thanks.
Thank you, Helena. There's a second question which I'm actually going to take. Does the presented data is available through open APIs? And the answer to that is yes. Now, I should stress I'm not a computing expert, so I've never used an API myself. So I'm not the person to give you advice on how to use it, but I can say that if you go to the data tab on our website and open up, down the side menu, you will see web services. And under that, we have APIs. I believe there's an SDMX API and a JSON API. Those who know what APIs are may well recognize those terms, but we have API access to our database. And I believe from talking with my computing colleagues, you can use it to pick up a single number or an entire data set. Then there's a third question about waste by product and residue from agriculture, fisheries, food activities. I'm not sure who's volunteering to answer on waste. It's Viveka.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'll give it a stab by using this excellent publication where the chapter 10 is about waste. And there we can read that the agriculture, forestry and fishing, as well as the processing of food, beverage and tobacco, generated 57 million tons of waste in the EU in 2018. So 57 million tons of waste in the EU in 2018. And this is around 2.7% of all waste from productive activities. There is also a very nice graph here where you can see that the amount of waste has actually decreased a bit over the years. And you can also see it so that you have a better grip on what is exactly from agriculture, forestry and fishing and what is more from the processing parts in the chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Viveka. Then we have a question on fallow land. Do you have data on arable land which is not cultivated, left unused? And I believe that Mario has the answer to that.
Yes, good morning, everybody. So we have almost a constant data collection concerning the cultivated areas and the production. We get estimates almost every month when let's say we are getting closer to the harvest season, and as part of that data collection, we get annual figures on the land which is not cultivated, which is called fallow land or set-aside land. And I had time to quickly look into the figures, and in 2020, we had a bit below 6 million hectares left aside from the farming, and that represents 3.6% of the all utilized agricultural area in the EU. And this fallow land is set aside, but it is part of the, let's say, the crop rotation. So that maybe next year or the year after it is again put back into cultivation. So it is resting this land.
Okay, thank you, Mario. We have some further questions. So is there a possibility to compare the EU CAP targets, Common Agricultural Policy targets for countries with their actual production? I think that Roxandra was going to take that. Is that correct?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for your very interesting questions. The statistics that we produce in general in our domain is the agriculture. They are mainly targeted to monitor all the CAP targets. So this is, let's say, the main aim of our statistics. So that is why, of course, that what we are producing, it is clearly linked with the targets of the Common Agriculture Policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then the next question I think is perhaps a little bit more political policy related. I'll ask Viveka if she wants to say a word or two, but it falls a little bit outside perhaps of Eurostat's responsibility. I mean, how do we face the dilemma of preserving the environment and utilising it at the same time?
Yeah, sure. I can at least say something about how the statistical world is trying to depict this dilemma. And what you can find, I think not specifically in this publication, but on the website and in other publications, is that we are following the land use in general, and there you can also see what part of it is there for productive purposes and what part is there as reservations or somehow as other land outside of the productive. So you get a feeling for the size. In some areas in statistics, we're also helping out, like for the follow-up of the Sustainable Development Goals. And there are specific indicators that delve deeper into this issue about what is nature reserves or the intensity of the production. So we typically serve analysts with this data, and then you will get more information about the more exact policies from other places, but where they are stepping on the type of statistics that we are having. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then there's a question that we were a little bit debating what the abbreviation, what was meant by the abbreviation. How has AG Tech impacted food production in EU? We're assuming that means agricultural technology. I'm not sure who was volunteering to answer that, if anybody. I'll leave that for a second. Maybe somebody will volunteer to pick that up. There was another question. Do you have data regarding mushroom production? And Mario had an answer for that.
Yes, I confirm. We do have data in the same data collection I mentioned before. We collect every year data on the production area for mushrooms and also the produced volume, so the tons of mushrooms cultivated and produced. Maybe I can add something to the agricultural technology question above. Very, very briefly, because we are running this, let's say, big data collection which concerns all farms every 3 to 4 years, which is called the Integrated Farm Statistics. And we know that this is more and more an issue, and we are planning to include questions, not let's say comprehensive questions, but at least to get some hints about the use of precision farming, things like that in the 23 data collection. But I think here Leena is more of an expert to add more things. And we also have tried to encourage the member states to work more together to think what would be the best way of getting more data directly from agricultural machines to help the statistical production, and this work is going on.
Okay, thank you. We had a question. Forestry data is focused on exploitation of forests. Are there also data on forests that are not exploited for wood? And I believe that Helena had an answer on that.
So even if, yes, thanks, Tim. Even if forestry is not in our unit, it's in the unit of environment, there are in fact information on wooded areas in Lucas. We do collect information on short rotation coppices in farms. So there's also information on, let's say, wood producing producers, but which are farms mainly in our statistics. And then Lucas collects data on land use and land cover all over Europe. So you can have cover regardless of use. You have wooded land in the Lucas statistics. Then Mario was passing on a bit the ball to me for the machinery and equipment. Yes, we are preparing the data collection now for 2023, which we call the Farm Structure Survey of 2023. And we have quite a new number of variables on use of robotics in farms and precision farming equipment, and let's say more detailed information of the use of this equipment on the farms. But this information will only be available for publication in 2025. But we are quite enthusiastic for this new data collection, and we hope that we'll get some nice information from that.
Okay, thank you. Then we have another question. Are there any available publications on the climate impact of agriculture? And if not, are there any plans for Eurostat to make such a publication? I mean, Edward, perhaps you can tell it, or
Yeah.
Viveka.
Yes, exactly. Well, yeah, I could just start to say that there is in this publication an excellent greenhouse gas emissions page that you can go to, number 98, where you can see some information about how this is both the trends and how it's divided between countries. But I would also point to that the whole area of climate change is something that Eurostat is covering quite extensively, and you can go to the database and find a sort of a data page where you can also enter into more details, where you see how the different sectors are being pictured. So we've actually had a review asking users what they would want to see when it comes to these types of informations, and it turned out that a lot of the requests were something that we already have covered. So please delve deeper into the website. There should also be statistics explained articles and sometimes also publications that you can use. Thank you.
Okay.
Edward, I don't know if you want to say something else on this.
That's fine. Okay. Then we have a topical question on: do you have any data on the exact amount of imported cereal from Russia? There, I would just say that I can just say that we have that sort of data in our external trade database. I don't have it immediately to hand. I don't know if any of the panel knows off the top of their heads, but it's a number that can be found in our external trade database. And I would suggest if you pass a question to our user support people, they can look that up for you and get that. But yes, it's available. We have complete external trade data, I think, for 2021 now. Then there's two that we're going to roll together because I believe Helena has an answer. Oh, Edward's signalling. Edward, yes.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to point out that within the publication and the chapter on trade, there is actually some information about not cereals on its own, but crops and crop products. Obviously, we had to make a selection, but it does show, in fact, imports of crops and crop products from the Ukraine, for example, and exports to Russia. So it's just to give you a flavor that it's very topical. We have this information within COMEX in terms of valuations. To get the exact data, you would need to go there. But also in the publication, we provide a link, the QR code, to a detailed statistics explained article on extra EU trade in agricultural goods. So that would be a good starting point, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, and on trading goods, I can say that since we've just finished the compilation of 2021 data, we are actually in the process of updating our summary articles on external trade. The ones you'll find in Statistics Explained at the moment, some of them will be up to 2020, but in the coming days and weeks, they will be being updated to 2021. There's a couple of questions that we're going to roll together, and Helena has the answer, I believe, which is: do you have data on family farms, and are there any specifications regarding women in the sector?
Thank you again, Tim. Yes, we do have a Statistics Explained article specifically on family farming. I will ask then the colleagues to make it available. I don't know if we can answer the questions through Slido. There is a link to it, family farming in the EU. We also have the collection of data on farms is also by sex of the manager, or also sex of the holder. And so we do publish information split by sex of the manager and the holder. So we do have a clear picture of women in agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. Then question 14 is based on population projections. What do these numbers tell about the availability of workforce in the agri sector, future prospects? I'm not sure whether we can say anything about that really. I mean, the population projections are at the level of the total population, and I mean they give you a breakdown by age. Edward, do you?
Well, I think one of the important things is really how can agriculture be more attractive? There are always going to be push and pull factors, but if we want more people in agriculture, it has to be an attractive place. So it's about having a fair standard of living for farmers, for people who are working on farms. So I think that is possibly the most important thing. How do we get more women involved in farming, rather than necessarily just looking at population projections themselves?
Okay, thank you. And then there's a question, according to the data, can one confirm Engel's law stating that the percentage of income allocated for food purchases decreases as income rises? I'm not sure if anybody has an answer to, or has a more specific answer to this. All I can say is, based on the bits and pieces of statistical analysis I've seen from time to time, I believe, yes, that our data probably does show this, but you'd have to do some detailed digging into things like our statistics on income and living conditions. It's certainly true at national level that higher GDP per capita is linked with a lower proportion of spending on food often, but I'm not sure that we've done a very specific analysis of this. I think Edward again is.
Yeah, in fact, on page 89 of our publication, we look at exactly the share of total household consumption expenditure spent on catering services, alcoholic beverages, non-alcoholic beverages and food. And yes, we see that in fact the lowest proportion is in Germany, Luxembourg, Denmark. These are high income countries. And on the other end, we have Romania, Greece and Estonia, although that may be for slightly different reasons. But yes, I think it is a very interesting point, and that's looked at in chapter 9 of our publication.
Thank you. As you can see, Edward knows the publication much better than I do. Then there's a question, do we have access to a data page about agriculture's impact on biodiversity? Viveka.
I don't think we have something that would spell out exactly the links between a certain production and its impact. That would typically be a bit too much assumptions to be sort of what could be captured within statistics. However, what you would be able to find, for example, in the Sustainable Development Goals numbers that are also on the data page, on the web page, is the changes in birds, farmland birds. So that would be something to look into if you're interested in the impact. There is also the difference between the organic farming and the more intensified farming, and so you, in that sense, you could also go in and also like get the first stepping stones for this type of analysis.
Thank you, Viveka. Can I just say that as a very keen bird watcher myself, the Common Bird Index is one of our indicators that I follow with great interest each time it's updated. So question 17, is it possible using Eurostat data to calculate the dependency degree on imports of agricultural products by country and for the EU as a whole. I believe Ruxandra's going to answer that.
Yes, thank you very much. I cannot give a clear answer. Practically, normally should be very possible once we look to the statistics of the external trade. And I'm saying this that is very possible because previously I have worked in the energy statistics, and there we have produced this energy dependency of Europe on each, let's say, outside Europe data provider. So for sure, this is something possible, but of course needs an analysis of the data which are available in external trade statistics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a topical question. Do you have data on grains from Ukraine or poultry from Ukraine? I think we've already answered that, but the answer is yes. But there's some data in the publication, or by following the links you can it's in the external trade database, and external trade data is extremely detailed in terms of products. So using our external trade data, you can find imports of all sorts of products from every country in the world. Do you have data or plans to study the impact of climate change on livestock production? I think I'll have to make that the last question because I see we're running out of time. Does somebody have an answer about climate change and livestock production?
Well, if I could perhaps just come back to this, that statistical offices typically don't look so much on impact, so that we don't really follow this type of modeling exercise where you have to assess what factors are important in that sense. We typically don't look forward, but we're looking at the situation as it is now and comparing what has happened before. So in that sense, you have the ingredients to be able to make such an analysis within the statistics, and we're really keeping track how to make it as detailed as possible to be able to do that type of thing. But and in the sense, perhaps you can compare what the different countries do, and in that sense, you can also get a bit more of a sense of such types of impact. But we do not have any plans to do that types of studies here. We're providing information for other people to do that type of study. Thank you.
I think we'll have to call an end there because we have very much come to the end of our time. So it just remains for me to thank all of our panel, all of our agriculture statistics experts, and our director who covers the agriculture amongst other areas. So Viveka, Ruxandra, Mario, Helena, Monica and Edward, thank you all very much. I hope I've not forgotten anybody there. I would just say that this has been recorded. We will make the recording available in the coming days for anybody who missed part or whole of the session. We have further podcasts planned in the coming future, and I can see that Imogen has a hand raised. Imogen, do you?
There is on Slido, there is a follow-up survey which I've just launched just to get everybody's opinions on this event. So if you could contribute to that, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, again on Slido, the follow-up on the session. I believe, and Anna Maria will shout at me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not wrong, the next Eurostat webinar will be on gender statistics just ahead of the International Women's Day. So the webinar will take place on the 7th of March. International Women's Day is the 8th of March, and we'll be looking at a couple of aspects of gender statistics there. We'll be looking at employment and the gender pay gap. I would like to welcome you all to that webinar in a couple of weeks' time. I'd like to thank you all for your attendance and a very lively Q&A session. I hope that our panel didn't feel too grilled, but it shows that agriculture and the food chain is a topic of wide interest, which is what we believed when we published the publication. Anna Maria has just reminded me that a couple of weeks after that, around the 22nd of March, we'll be doing a webinar on transport statistics as well, but they'll all be widely advertised. So with the time at just past 12 o'clock, I'd like to thank all our panel for their hard work. I'd like to thank you all for attending and asking questions, and I hope to see you again in a couple of weeks. Thank you all very much.